Welcome to the Jaunty Mantis. This is a podcast where curious gamers get to ask creative questions.
Yay!
There, I did it right that time, Jesse.
You did. What's up out there, all you mantoids in the tablelands?
Oh, wow. We have mantoids.
That's I'm trying to workshop a little bit of like what do we call our fans?
We have fans.
Uh, it's at least four.
Oh, okay. Hi, Mom.
Yeah. What's up, Dad?
All right. Well, Jesse, if in case people don't know if this is their first episode of the Jaunty Mantis, what do we do on this podcast?
We wax poetic about topics of interests related to tabletop role-playing games and occasionally science fiction nerd media.
That's right. Sometimes we don't even talk about role-playing games. This is a bonus episode, and most of the time, bonus episodes are about role-playing game topics or nerd adjacent. We're in between seasons at the moment. Coming up is season 4, and we are going to be asking for creative questions from our curious gamer audience for season 4. And Jesse, how could they send us those questions?
If you have a question you'd like for us to talk about and pick apart and tease out on the air, you can email us that question at jauntymantis, all one word, at gmail.com.
Correct.
So please do.
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
All right. I have an answer.
Okay.
Well,
The question
let's
is,
do it on 3. Ready? One,
okay,
two, three.
3.
No.
Why? So I don't know where this is gonna fall in our order of bonus episodes getting up. So if you can put this before the episode that I'm gonna refer to when I ask this question.
Okay.
But last week we talked about a thing you were doing
Hmm.
with 3.5 Dungeons and Dragons, where you were taking the elements and stripping them all down and making a fast leveling game, and you were going to run it this Sunday, which, as date of recording, is yesterday.
Hmm.
And I was not going to be able to play because I was going to be driving back from Colorado, which I did for 12
Congratulations.
hours. Oh boy. Uh, so my question for you, because I'm really curious, is how did it go?
So you're referring to the mock roguelike version of Dungeons and Dragons that I created or cobbled together, I should say.
Yes, and
We
from what I remember, the key features of this game, just as a refresher to the audience, let's see if I can do this. Correct me where I'm wrong.
Sure.
There was not going to be any classes.
Hmm.
Stats were going to be pretty minimal or non-existent.
No.
Uh, Skills weren't going to be a part of it, but class features were a thing you could randomly roll up. Everybody had access to a couple spells.
Hmm.
They were going to level up pretty quickly
Hmm.
and then get to roll on that table again to just pick up another class feature from something.
I mean, you mostly have it correct. I mean, that's the gist of it. I mean, I'm to split hairs, like the only class feature was the spells because I just wanted to do a rough draft version. And I figured that would be the easiest way to do it instead of being to be like, oh, you have Barbarian's Rage, or you have an animal companion, or you have Wild Shape, or you have weapon focus. Instead, everybody just got spells, was the way I did it. Um,
Okay.
and then skills are still in the game, but they're done automatically. They just have a normal, 4 ranks plus your level, you're good. Um, so pretty simple and straightforward. So yes, I did get a chance to run that yesterday for our gaming group. And I will say that at the end of it, they said that they enjoyed it and that it was interesting and that they would play it again. That's the
Do you
vibe that I
believe
got.
them though?
I do.
Okay.
But I will also say that I do have to preface this by saying that like our gaming group is used to my bullshit when it comes to projects like this. Like I once ran a like playing card style role playing game And I ran the group through like 17 different iterations of it, I think, at one point in time. And so our gaming group is like really cool, very open to me doing like what I would call like experimental ideas. And they'll play along, and I can tell whether or not they're having a good time with it or whether they find it interesting. And then at the end, if they have critical feedback, they're not shy at all about letting me know like what that feedback is and if they have any ideas or solutions for it. So I take our friends at their word when they say, what they did, which was generally speaking that they liked it, that they thought it was interesting, that it was fun, and that they would do it again, right? So from a feedback perspective, I thought it went very well.
Cool. What were some big mechanical takeaways from it?
Um, 3.5 is really complex.
Yeah.
So even though I tried to simplify this, I tried to make a roguelike 3.5 D&D game where you basically roll rapid fire and just start getting things and then you start playing. And even with a simplified system of, okay, roll this, then this, okay, cool, you got this. Even with doing that, character creation still took fucking forever.
Yeah,
I
we're on a tight schedule with that game too.
Yeah, yeah. We only play for a couple of hours on Sunday nights, and that was the first note that I took is like I was like, wow, this is taking way too long because and it's nothing against the guys, it's the design of the system. Like the whole reason why I wanted to do this is so that I had like a stand-in game that we could just throw down and start playing, you know, the next time the person running the game is out sick or has a scheduling conflict or goes to Colorado for some strange reason. So,
To get a tattoo.
so the whole point of the character creation was supposed to be simple, straightforward, and fast. And I think the simple and straightforward part, I would give that maybe a B minus.
Okay.
I think it could have been more simplified, more straightforward. I think it took too long to explain. But as far as being fast, like it was slow. It took forever. It
What
was
step
roll this,
dragged?
then roll this, roll this, then roll this. So every step dragged, you
Okay.
know? Like from assigning ability scores, the way we assigned ability scores was, you have your standard array of strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. You have six of those. You have assigned ability scores of plus two, plus two, plus one, plus zero, minus one, and then you roll on 1d6 to see where you start, right? And I thought that would be simple and straightforward and fast, and even explaining it, I felt like it took too long. I was like, there has to be a better way that the GM can just do this and say, these are your ability scores.
Yeah, I
You know what
wonder
I
if you
mean?
could like have templated like depending on the number of stats, like the fast one, the smart one, and just
Hmm.
have all that stuff pre-filled. And so the
Yes.
only thing they roll is the spells.
Right. Well, look, because I still want to keep somewhat of a randomized element in play with this.
Hmm.
So I could see making a table of like the strong one, the fast one, the smart one, like you just said, and then you roll to see which one you get.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to create a system where it was like, oh my God, I can't believe I got this spell and these skills and this one use magical item. And it turned into a crazy game where it's like, if we were all in person, we'd be high fiving each other at the end of the night because we had so much fun. And,
I feel that way
you
most of the time you run games though. Just as a thing.
well,
And you're
thank you.
also just I'm calling it now. You are 7 iterations of this away from putting Incarnum powers in this game.
Wow, this is why you're my best friend amongst many reasons. You know me this well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Uh
And I'm here for it every step of the way.
right, right. But what I will say is that that would be a much better way of doing it is like roll to see if you're the fast one, the strong one, the smart one, so on and so forth.
Yep.
And then you could bundle these other things into it that would be appropriate to give the player character some guidance on what it is they do exactly, because that was the second problem we ran into is I had made a table of like, all right, roll to see what your core features are. Like, do you do a lot of damage? Do you have a ton of hit points? You know what I mean? Like, do you wear armor? Like, how many spells do you get? That kind of thing. And that was just too much of a swingy mess.
Yeah.
Like Patrick's character ended up having like a ton of hit points, but it's not like he was effective in combat. And Kurt's character, if I remember correctly, ended up getting a ton of hit points after we leveled up once or twice. And that ended up serving him very well. But when it came down to combat, it's not like he was a fighter character. He just took a lot of abuse,
Yeah.
and it's like that's not really super fun in a role-playing game of just being like, well, I'm the punching bag, everybody. Like, haha.
Yeah.
There's nothing empowering about that.
Did the challenge rating thing that I predicted might be an issue, was that an issue at all? Oh, sorry.
It's
For the listeners, in case this is your first episode, when we first talked about this, I said without the bounded accuracy of fifth edition,
hmm
way challenge rating goes up, the slider is armor class
hmm
3.5. It's
Right,
basically armor class and damage resistance is going up, 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 up as challenge rating increases and monsters get harder. And
right.
so without the base attack bonus and character abilities built into the 3.5 classes, I was afraid for Matty that it was gonna be a rough time as the CR of the monsters went up.
So, all right. So here's what happened. The I started with a challenge rating of a quarter. Like typically for a standard 3.5 game, I would start with, a challenge rating one or a set of challenge rating half creatures or whatever, right? I started with the lowest challenge rating I thought was appropriate. The worst battle was the first battle with the challenge rating one, quarter monsters, which were basically rats.
Was it
Uh,
because there were a lot of them? Was it just action economy?
So it that was part of it. The other part is that they were so small, they were so fucking difficult to hit. They had like a 20 armor class, you
Oh,
know.
because the size modifier
Right.
that existed in 3.5.
So like even though they were the lowest possible challenge rating that I thought was appropriate for the game, I mean, I guess you could go to 1/6 or 1/8 or 1/10, but I don't see a lot of creatures like that in the monster manuals. Um, but you know, with them having that high of an armor class, it was really kind of defeating for the first fight of the go to be so like miss, 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 miss. And then when those creatures hit, they did like 1 point of damage. And then there was like a DC 11 fortitude saving throw to see if you were poisoned,
Yeah.
which I think got failed once, or maybe twice at the
Oh, someone
most.
got the filth fever.
So like the so that the first fight was rough just because it was like, what are we all doing here? I don't understand. That was kind of the vibe that I was getting from everyone, is like we're trying to make this work. The other part of the problem is that when all of your abilities are randomized, because everybody had a random assortment of spells, okay, and you could clearly see that some people forgot what they had. Like Patrick's character had magic missile, but I think he only used it once the entire night, when the spell system was designed for you to be able to use that over and over again using the recharge magic system from Unearthed Arcana, where when you cast a spell, then you have to roll 1d6 plus 1 and wait that number of rounds before you can use it again. Every round is roughly 6 seconds. So, it's to eliminate the spells per day problem of having like a roguelike role playing game.
That's
But
so interesting. Just a note on that recharge system because of the way recharge works with monster powers in
mm-hmm,
5e, that
mm-hmm,
there's very clearly a line between those two.
yes,
Like, yeah, you're going to roll, and on a six, they get their power back. Roll
yeah.
at the end of every turn or beginning of every turn.
I think that it would have might have been better suited to do scrolls instead of recharge spells, so that you had a defined list of what you could use, and then when you used one, it was gone, maybe.
Hmm.
Or to vastly lower the number of spells they had.
Steel
So,
Shadow Dark.
right. Yeah. Explain Shadow Dark. Go ahead.
So Shadow Dark spellcasting system is you whenever you cast a spell, you make a spell casting roll. And so this kind of to avoid double jeopardy, I don't think there's like saving throws against most spells because you have to make your spell casting roll. The
Mm-hmm.
difficulty of the spell casting roll is 10 plus the level of the spell.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a DC 11 to cast a first level spell. You roll a d20, you add your casting ability modifier. So wizards add their intelligence modifier. If you get an 11 or higher, cool, spell goes off. You can use it again very next turn. You roll a 10 or below, you lose that spell for the day and it doesn't go off.
Mm-hmm.
Roll a 1, there's a mishap table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've seen similar systems for 3.5, like spell skills, or whatever the case may be. So that makes sense. Um, but that I don't think was the biggest part of the problem. I think the biggest part of the problem was that the uh, the average character had 5 0 level spells and 2 1st level spells, and then when you leveled up, you got even more spells. And because you didn't choose these originally, I felt like it was difficult for them to keep track of what they had. And then as soon as they leveled up, they got more spells. And I
Yeah.
think, and I think it was just like, I think it was a bit overwhelming for them in the sense of like, okay, we're in combat. Well, I'm just going to do the thing I did last turn. And I'm sitting there. I took notes about what they got as they were rolling for them, just so that I could, use it to gauge like whether or not things were successful, and they didn't use half of the resources that they had available to them.
Yeah, it
Um,
sounds like probably just too many options.
too
And I
many
wonder, like,
options.
sorry, I wonder, I mean, if I had been there, and I'm sure I'll be there for some other time we do this,
Hmm.
like, I, John played 3.5
Hmm.
back in the day. I don't know, or at least he played 3.0. I don't know if we got into 3.5. He didn't play it to the level you and I did.
Right.
Kurt has played 3.5 before. I think I was Patrick's last D&D game before he joined this, and that was in 1998 when we were living in the dorms.
Hmm.
Um, like, yeah, and he was my neighbor across the hall, and we went to like the lounge on our floor and played second edition.
Hmm.
So I don't think Pat has any experience with 3.5.
Right. Right. And one of the reasons why I chose 3.5 as a system was because all that information is available online. And I thought that that would be an easy way to be like, well, here's what your spells are. Don't worry about buying a book, just look them up online. But what I found is that, especially with Patrick, is that, um, you know, like looking something up online and then also remembering what it is are two totally different things.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to pick on Patrick. I think that was the same with everybody at the table. I think it was the same with me. Like I was looking up spells as it was happening. And I think when you play a wizard or a sorcerer or a bard or a magic spell using character in 3.5, when you choose your spells specifically, that like makes that an important part of what your character does because you chose it. And so you commit at least the concept to memory. Like when you're waiting for your turn, you know what your spells are and then you get ready to use them. When all that is assigned randomly, it kind of doesn't matter, right? So a lot of the time what they ended up doing was just like punching stuff or like hitting stuff with like a spear or whatever. And the whole point of having spellcasting as the class system was the class feature, instead of using all the other stuff that's available, was to simplify it and make it interesting and diverse at the same time. Like you all cast spells, we all know what that's like. We all have a rough idea of what that does. And here you can look up your spells online. And if I had to redo it right now, I would do like 2 or 3 0 level spells and then 1 1st level spell is the
Yeah,
way I would do it.
I think the simplification thing of it is you do the class features instead of the spells.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I mean, because even though wild shape and like three animals, like
Hmm.
that come with that wild shape. You can
Yeah.
turn into this, this, and this.
Yeah.
It recharges like this.
Right.
Barbarian's Rage, you can do this. It recharges just like the recharge. A recharge magic system should be for every feature that would have limited use.
I agree. Yeah. And I would also add that if you were going to have a spellcasting character, You would be like, here, you get one attack spell, one utility spell, and one other spell, whatever that third category is. Like that's the way I would do it. So you would know what your attack spell is. Maybe you're still rolling randomly for what that is, but at least you know you have an attack spell.
Yeah.
So that your character isn't like what their most successful action was in that first combat was just grabbing rats,
Because touch
and
attack.
because of touch attack, exactly. So, you know, so like I think in as far as mechanically speaking, it needs to be further simplified. So in the next version, if there is a next version of it that gets played, um, I will do that. I will simplify the system so that instead of us doing endless amount of rolling, it's like you roll to see what your character type is. Like you're the sneaky guy. Okay, you have the sneaky guy skills. Here's what they all are. They're all at the following, here's what you roll when you use a sneaky guy skill. It's 4 plus your character level. You're done. That would be way easier for people to handle because we did this like, the whole point of this game was to be like an impromptu resource so that, GM can't run a game. Let's play this instead. Make it simple for people to understand what they're doing and what their characters can do in the game. And I think that was the first failure of the system was that there was just, like that. The second failure was the setup. And I realized that almost immediately. And I didn't change it because I wanted to see where it went. But basically what I did is I just did I I I tried to impart to them that we could creatively make this fantasy element, all of the fantasy elements, all the story elements, all the world elements together. And what ended up happening is we ended up getting three different versions of great ideas. So
Yep.
like uh um Kurt's character seemed to come from a different world than his character. And Patrick's character seemed to come from a different world than either of those two characters. And I liked each one of their characters, and for such a small, short amount of time, I really liked what each one of them was doing. Like, his character was uh, someone who was convinced they were on some sort of like theme park ride, like some sort of like cruise ship excursion. And they were like, wow, these special effects are crazy. That was really dangerous. Like he'll tell it better than I ever could, but I was like laughing my ass off. I thought it was funny. This whole setup was that they were shipwrecked, they were marooned on a beach. There was this quasi magical creature who needed their help. He was very eccentric. I made sure to have jokes and laughs and goof him up so that we didn't have to take this too seriously. What I should have done was just like, you are all bodyguards in this town, or you are all adventurers in this town. The mayor has summoned you into his office and said, my daughter has been kidnapped by goblins. You know, I need you to go to that cave and rescue my daughter. That's all I should have done, is just kept it like stereotypical D&D fantasy, straightforward, let's go. And
Yeah.
instead I added all of this extra thematic complexity that didn't need to be there.
The Matty effect.
Yes. Thank you. I'm glad we have a name for it.
Yeah.
I'm just finding out about this now.
I think one of the things I think that I would recommend, and I've been thinking about this a lot with just a little passage of GM advice and Trophy Gold,
Yeah.
is to say like, hey, the focus in this scene is to do this. So you could
Yes.
just be like, hey guys, the focus in this scene is to get the quest from this old guy.
Right.
Like,
Yes. That
everybody
is a
cool?
great point.
Let's
Yes.
go.
Yes.
Um,
I would do that. Yeah. I would just assign quests, right? Your
yeah,
quest is to get the instructions from the mayor and find out where he needs you to go. All right,
yep.
you do that. Next part of the quest, go to where the mayor told you to go.
Yeah,
Rescue
that's
his
the
daughter.
focus of this scene.
Yes. Like, yeah, I would definitely do that differently next time. And instead of trying to force creativity to happen, I would just set up a standard generic template. And then if anybody decided to get super creative with it, I
And they
just yes
will.
and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
Cool.
yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to trying this again. I mean, maybe the next version won't have the spells in it. Maybe it'll be the class features that we talked about, like Barbarian Rage or Wild Shape or whatever the case may be. Um, I would like to see if that works a little bit differently than spells, just because you have one or two things just to narrowly focus on, you know, instead. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think it wasn't a complete failure, but there was a lot of hard lessons to get learned right away. But
I love these fantasy heartbreakers you keep coming up with.
I just,
I love hearing about them. Like I love the joy it brings you to work on them. I love getting to be a sounding board for it. So I'm glad you got to play it. I wish I could have been there.
yeah, I think it's hilarious that you call them fantasy heartbreakers. I don't know why that never occurred to me before, but it perfectly makes sense.
I
So,
mean, it's what it is. It's like I'm gonna do D&D, but better than D&D, and then you
oh,
wind up creating something like infinitely more complex. Like,
yes,
yeah,
yes, for sure. Yeah.
half of like that. I'm gonna mention it again. Half that podcast, System Mastery, is self-published
Mm-hmm.
fantasy heartbreakers from the late '90s, early 2000s that these guys are like subjecting themselves to read
Yes,
all the way through and then talk about. And they find some interesting ideas every once in a while.
of
Like
course.
one of the ones that I kind of want to steal, hey, maybe this would be something to do for this. It was from like what was this game? It was called Fantasy Imperium, which is like it's the real world in the 10th century, but there's also elves and dwarves, and there's magic. But if you use magic, you're a witch and hated by God, and you're going to hell 100% definitely. Uh, but the idea for that is that each character has like an overriding goal, like to find love or something,
Mm-hmm.
and they also have a dramatic flaw that prevents them from achieving that. So there's
Ah,
character development baked in. You picked your goal and you pick a flaw that stops you from getting it.
right on.
And I'm like, that's a cool idea. Like
Yeah,
as a way
yeah,
to build character development and tension right from the beginning.
right. Yeah. My first reaction would be to maybe take offense to, I know you're doing it out of love by saying, these fantasy heartbreakers. But to be perfectly honest, this is kind of the heritage of our hobby.
Yeah.
Like we're grognards, but we're not like the ancient of the earth grognards, the originals. You know what I mean? And those guys, like they had to make everything, in between getting releases for different like zines or whatever, however it was being released, like you had to come up with your own rules. Like if there wasn't a rule set for how like a circus worked or a tavern or whatever, you had to come up with it on your own. So everybody was making their own version of Dungeons and Dragons at their own table. So like that's part of the, if this is my way of kind of like accepting our heritage as gamers and like celebrating it, like I'm happy to do it. I love it.
Yeah, I've never I've never heard anyone call something a fantasy heartbreaker in a pejorative sense. It's always done out of this like deep sense of love and affection. Like
Yeah.
it's just like, oh no, 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 no. But of course you did. Yes, of course we'll try it. Good for you for working on it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I will say this, like that whole thing about your circus, not a problem for Palladium games because the table for generating a traveling show is in
Hmm.
at least five separate world books, the
Well,
same table reprinted.
well, at least it's not hidden within the fourth paragraph of a random OCC that nobody would ever play unless you're me on how to do that circus. So I'm
Yeah,
glad to
yeah.
hear it pops up in so many different books
Well,
because it's an important resource that people need to know.
I think there's like a three-sentence paragraph on page like 392 or something that's like a perception check is this, and that's it. It's just like in the middle of something.
Right.
And then everybody, like some people get bonus to perception. What does that mean? I don't know. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah. If anything, whenever I hear people like stringently stick to the rules as written, that's when a part of me kind of dies inside. Like I love fantasy heartbreakers and the people who want to make them. I love your failed role-playing game ideas just as much as I love my own. It's when people are too like stuck to the rules as written. like I've heard some YouTubers kind of make this analogy of like some gamers have this view of the people who make games as these like ultimate godlike sources of infinite wisdom, and they're not. They're experts, they're skilled, they're talented, they know what they're doing. They should be respected in that regard for making the products that we love. But at the end of the day, they're gamers like us.
Yeah.
And if a rule doesn't work at your table, or if you have a creative idea for something, I would rather be in a group that wants to try that out.
Can I make a confession?
Yeah, go for
I
it.
may have done this before, but part of the reason that I wanted to do riffs so much is to break myself of that habit by throwing
Really?
myself into running a game where there isn't a rule for everything.
Oh, wow.
Like where the rules are deliberately like actually the rules are fairly simple, but the way they're laid out is
Hmm.
obtuse and hard to understand, causing me to, out of a sense of expediency, have to just rule it in my head.
Yes. Yes. Which is kind of the golden rule of riffs as I understand it, which is to say like if a conflict or a problem comes up, do not look it up. Make a decision, and
Yep.
then after the game, then look it up, and then if you need to come back to the table and say, "Hey guys, I got it wrong with this rule. This is how we're going to fix it. Moving forward, it works like this."
Yep.
Yeah. Rifts, like I've said it before and I'll say it again, Rifts is a surprisingly easy game to create a character for and play. It's just on the surface, it's kind of just like, oh God, what do I got to do again? What
Yeah.
is this? Why can't I find this in the book? What, like, shouldn't the reason why there's a different laser damage, shouldn't that be clarified in the gun? Why is
Yeah.
that?
Just gonna have to rule it.
Yeah, that's just how Riffs is done, and that's part of the charm of it. Um, and
It's
go
it.
back and listen to that episode.
Yeah, it's a different like it's the way I said, we both talked about how Dungeon World, what that did for our DMing chops.
Right.
It's the narrative DMing chops. I'm doing this riffs things deliberately to improve my mechanics chops,
Well,
to
then
take
I
it beyond just knowing them.
right, and you know, based on what you just said, that just inspired an idea in me for a future episode. So let's mark it down here. What I'd like, because so we've at the recording of this episode, we've about just crested over the year mark. So the Jaunty Mantis has been out for about a year now. What I'd like to do is come back in a year around this time and see what you have learned and adapted because of Rips. Like, how has it changed you? What kind of things are different now in that regard? Like, if you were to make a fantasy heartbreaker style game from Riffs, what would you do? Like, I think that would be an awesome idea to explore, even if it's just off the top of your head, even if it's we forgot about it and then strangely remembered it later.
Yeah,
So let's
I'm
do it.
down.
Perfect. All
Well,
right. Yeah.
I'm
Anything
glad you had
else?
fun doing it. I got nothing else. You got anything else?
No, no. I'm. If the audience doesn't mind hearing about this, updates on this idea and bonus episodes, I mean, that's kind of the reason why we started this podcast was that you and I have these conversations. Jesse is my best friend and I love him, and he will honor any fantasy heartbreaker I put in front of him.
It's
He
true, I will.
and that's like that I cannot stress this enough. Like this is why having a friend like Jesse is so vitally important to who I am as an individual in my life. Like I love this man. Like he will let me just go on and on and on about these inane ideas that like I have. Like who else is going to listen to me talk about this?
And I'll get excited about them.
Yeah. So
So you
get to it,
too can have
Jesse.
a parasocial friend like Jesse. All you have to do is leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple
That's
Podcasts.
a good point.
Yeah. And then you could pretend that I'm your friend. So, yeah.
Do you have a crazy idea that you want these two nerds right here to listen to? If you have a question for us for season 4, that's what season 4 is all about. It's about your questions. We recognize that you are curious and creative gamers just like us. And if you dig what we do on this podcast, come be a part of it. Send us a question, johntmantis@gmail.com, and we will do our best to put it in season 4.
Looking forward to it. So I guess on the way out, go out there and play some fucking games and or like love the Forgotten Realms like my friend Chris does.
That's right. We got to get that in at least once episode. All right.